One of the first things that I'd done when I moved into my humble little home was to hang this beautiful fabric wall hanging. You can kind of see it there behind me. Um, there she is. And it was one of the first things I'd done when I kind of come in through the door. I hung that, and it sits in the centre of the space. And I had brought it especially for this little house, and I found it really randomly. It is just one of those things that happened, but as we always say, never random, never by chance, always by design. And I brought it for this little house, and I can remember laying down on the floor. I was so tired. I mean, extremely tired. I'd spent a spell of a time of being homeless. I was living in a hostel. I was also learning to walk again after having major surgery on the left leg at the time, and I was so extremely tired. I can remember laying on the floor in the lounge, and I was just filled with this real sense of thanks and gratitude. I was so grateful for the simplicity of having my very own front door. I can remember just kind of laying there and just feeling everything just sink into the carpet, into the floor. And I can remember feeling really safe, feeling really secure, and I could close my eyes and I could finally rest. That was the feeling I had at the time. And I fell asleep on that floor with just carpet. There was no furniture, there was no belongings. It was all yet to be moved in and resourced. And at that point there wasn't even any electricity switched on. And I found out later it was just a switch in the outside. But there was no electricity. And I just laid there full of thanks, full of gratitude. And I can remember laying there just looking at the walls. Everything was bare, everything was empty. And that sense of just feeling as if I could just close my eyes finally and I could rest. And I fell asleep. And I slept for over 12 hours. It's not the first time that's happened along the way. And as I woke up, I remember seeing a sliver of light coming through the cracks in the blinds. And it had gone around about 6 in the morning, and the sun was beginning to rise there in the east. And I can remember kind of rolling onto my side and gazing up, just gazing up at the wall hanging. You imagine, I come in through the door, I've been given the keys, and that was a huge emotional moment, being able to walk through the door with the keys, with a little bag, and all that's in that bag is a wall hanging. And I remember gazing up at that wall hanging, and it was this feeling, that she had watched over me while I slept. And I was so grateful. And as I say, I just discovered her by chance. A wonderful artist called Wendy Andrews. And I discovered it by chance. and I was just so mesmerised by it and thought I want that to hang in the centre of my home. And that was round at about 9 years ago, so um, 2011. And I was so grateful. And in the coming weeks, I felt the Morrigan leave. I had this experience where I felt her, and I think it was either close to All Hallowed Eve or it was close to solstice. And I'd felt her leave, and in my mind's eye, I remember gazing out the window, and in my mind's eye, and the sun was setting, and in my mind's eye, I could see her walking off into the west with the setting sun. Um, and there was this, this feeling that I had arrived, that there was a change stirring, there was a change that was taking hold, but things were going to be softer, they were going to be gentler. There was something else about to unfold and unravel. And in those coming weeks, as I felt the Morrigan leave, the weeks that followed, I would often gaze up at the wall hanging. And I remember one day in particular, I felt this new presence, this new energy that was beginning to kind of show itself around me. I could feel it on the edge of the space. I could feel her making contact. It's a bit like what I said yesterday. In the previous story, with the Morrigan, is about listening. Listening deeply to that subtle information, and in that subtle information, it becomes anything but subtle. And there was this sense of this new presence that was beginning to show itself, and it was soft and it was gentle, yet strong at the same time, and her hair was like fire, yet she was kind and she was compassionate, and her eyes were green. There was this real kind of striking sense of the colour of the eyes, and her eyes being green, and there was this feeling of a green cloak and robe, and I remember gently asking, "Who are you, and what are you about?" And I've shared this story before, but what come back was simply, this feeling of, "Dear Shane, who are you and what are you about?" And as I've said in previous stories, I then spent a good couple of years really exploring that, and does that ever stop? That's the thing. The encounters that followed thereafter, I would often see her wearing this green cloak, fixed by a oak leaf brooch, and I could feel it just there as a clasp on her cloak, as if it was pulled round, and that was what was holding the cloak in place, was this oak leaf brooch. Then what followed was unbelievable, and I say it was 2011, and I can remember one particular day where I was walking through my local town, and I had this real urge to turn the corner and to go into this charity shop that sat on the corner there. It was just this feeling, it was a very strong magnetic feeling, and there was this sense of, there was something in there that was going to be important. And I remember kind of walking over to the counter, and looking down at the counter, and there, sitting there, was this oak leaf brooch, And I remember feeling completely shocked, taken back, because now it was the confirmation and it was the validation, and it was without a shadow of doubt completely an answer, to the question. You know, it was like, you know, who are you, what are you about, and it now become tangible. It's now becoming real. It's now becoming physical. um, and I remember just kind of walking out that shop, and in complete gratitude again, you know, um, these these energies, they they show you so much in the most of profoundest of ways. Um, and I think it wasn't long after, it wasn't long after, where I'd got uh, approached, by Sheila. Now Sheila is the most incredible psychic artist, and again links are in the video. But she had said to me, you know, Shane, you know, we'd known each other for a while, a few years at the time. You know, do you want to do an exchange for a portrait? Would you do a consultation in exchange? Would you like a portrait? And I just thought, what an incredible, lovely thing, to have done. What a great experience. What a great, wonderful exchange. So, we're sitting there, and she's painting away with watercolors, painting away with watercolors, whilst I'm sharing some messages, and she's working away, and then she turns the portrait round, and it was if she had taken a photograph of what I had seen for months and weeks. And I can remember feeling again in complete awe. You know, this being was absolutely wanting to really make itself known and show itself in the most profoundest of ways. And here is the first portrait, and I say the first because there is a story. Okay, hair like fire, green cloak. But look at that. Now this is going to become very relevant as the story goes on. And that was 2011, and it's now 2021. Have I got the true significance of that oak leaf brooch? Okay, I've only just got the significance of the oak leaf brooch. This shows you, you know, these experiences, you know, the threads of them span so much time. And for me, it is complete validation and confirmation. But look at the kindness. That soft, warming, gentle presence of those eyes that often watch me. I can feel them watching, like looking in with a real sense of knowing. But it's interesting, in the last few days I felt I almost like want to say a sadness within the eyes. But you know, when I've listened to that, it's this sense of the deep collective healing that is happening within the collective. You know, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of trauma in the collective. You know, I was talking to some families in this last week who are really, really struggling to get by, and struggling to put food on the table. And here we are in, you know, 2021, living in one of the most affluent countries in the world, and yet you've got families who are literally struggling to put food on the table. You know, I'm not sure what the solution is, but I do know that community is at the heart of that solution. I'm profound. You know, that whole experience up to this point was hugely profound. And then in 2000, so in 2000, and you know, I can remember, you know, kind of feeling her around me. There was this definite sense of a link or connection to Ireland, which would come and go, which would come and go. It was kind of very watery. It would come and go. But there was this sense of Iona, and there was this real kind of feeling of that name, and I didn't know if it was a place, although I know Iona links to Scotland, but there was this feeling of a name, and I got a sense of, kept feeling the green being really important, and the feeling of the Emerald Isle. All of that was kind of very watery, and then around 2019 I had an experience of the Mark of the Witch. You will find the video, and I will remember to put a link within this video as well. And I had that experience, and then a little way after that, and that was in All Hallowed Eve, around about All Hallowed Eve on 2019, and thereafter I was having this conversation with Sheila one day, and kind of really aware that, you know, that the energy of this incredible guide was beginning to show itself differently. And I had the conversation with Sheila, and she said, well, I'll go away and I'll paint what comes through. And, you know, there were certain things that I'd said to her that, you know, that I was seeing, and she said, listen, you know, leave it with me and I'll go away and paint. And here we are. Let's see the brooch again. And all that light, you know, from darkness to light. And that is the story of the two guides, you know, moving from the darkness to the light, you know, very much like being in the Long Barrow in West Kennet, and that whole kind of journey of lighting up that barrow, going from the darkness to the light. And look at that hat. I just absolutely adore that hat. And that was a profound time, you know. It was a real profound time. It was a sense of, you know, I was placed very firmly onto a magical path that had always been there for as long as I can remember, but not in this way. This was more like, well, the innate said it to me one day, you know, it's not like you're learning, it's more about you remembering. And it was this sense of remembering, and, you know, sort of like magic seems to come to me quite naturally. You know, the form of magic I use predominantly like a candle magic, and the words, they seem to flow, they come to me. It's all that light, it's all about light, and, you know, almost a sense of manifestation within the light. And, you know, I understood that, you know, candle magic was as old as time, and, you know, it's been used so often, you know, but that's another video. But it was profound, you know. The opening up was profound. And we move through another thread now, where, and this is really recent, you know, I did not know who she was. I knew she was there, I knew, and I was humbled by her. I was, you know, really kind of deep gratitude and reverence and respect, you know, and the wall hanging was a part of this story. You know, take a look at her. You know, it's the fiery red hair, yet a warmth and so much heart and this feeling of nurture and nourishment. But I didn't know, you know, and I gave her many names, but it was almost I was giving the name rather than the name coming, and you know that's something I was very aware of, but it was me trying to in a way kind of anchor that, I guess, you know, anchor a form of identity or some way of being able to not relate to her because I completely relate to her, but somehow I could name her. And none of that sticked. It, you know, names come and went, and none of it felt right. And present day, 2 weeks ago, I was invited onto an incredible webinar with a bunch of storytellers from Sligo over in Ireland, and they were telling the stories of Imbolc, and Imbolc has just come and gone. And Imbolc is the 1st of February, and it's the beginnings of the transition in the old calendar between winter, the darkest part, towards spring, the beginning of the light. You know, for me, when we look at beginnings of the year, you know, it's like January. No, it doesn't feel. And a good friend was sharing this with me. You know, spring feels like the beginning of the year. It's, you know, the year doesn't move in a linear way. It moves in a spiral, in a cycle, and in a circle. You know, those patterns, those things run through nature very naturally. So it's the 1st of February. And it has deep associations to Brigid, the goddess Brigid, and then later become Saint Brigid. And these beautiful stories, and one of these stories, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. One of these stories was that Brigid was a part of an order of priestesses, 20 including herself, and they were the wisdom keepers, they were the wise women, they were the seers, they were the healers. And Bridget, you know, she come to the Emerald Isle, and her teacher was the land itself, and she would wander, even though she was part of an order of wise wisdom keepers, she would often go wandering the land by herself. You know, the land was her teacher. And there's the story that on the eve of Imbolc, she goes off up to a copse of trees, but not any trees, oak trees. Okay, goes off to the copse of oak trees up on a hill in Kildare, and as she's travelling up there, it's like a pilgrimage. As she's travelling up there, there's this huge storm that comes. Immense rainfall and wind, and she's now cold and she's soaked through to the bone, and she's looking for some sanctuary, looking for some shelter, and she goes up into the copse of the trees and underneath this huge oak tree to take shelter. And of course this huge storms come, and not only now is it raining and it's wind and there's cold, also there's now a lightning storm. She's in the middle of a lightning storm, and there she is taking shelter under these huge oak trees, and one huge oak tree in particular, and she's taking shelter. Now the thing is, with a lightning storm, you can absolutely guarantee that if any trees are going to get struck, it has always been the oak trees. I don't know if it's because of their size, you know, these are big majestic trees, and this oak tree has got struck by lightning, and she's there standing underneath it, and it's got struck by lightning. Now when an oak tree gets struck by lightning, the lightning travels down through the centre of the tree. I will drop a photo in to show you, to give you an example. It strikes and it goes down through the centre of the tree, and it combusts. So it goes down into the heart of the tree and then combusts and burns from the inside out, which means that it carbonizes and creates huge like lumps of charcoal and embers, and it burns really fiercely like a furnace. And this is exactly what happened, and it warmed her. You know, it probably made all the difference. It warmed her. She was now warm and dry, and she sees this as a really profound experience, which it would be a profound experience and profound event. She sees it as a sign from the innate, and she gathers some wood, and she now rakes out some of the embers onto this wood, and she carries it down to a stone dwelling, and this stone dwelling had been abandoned, so it was a ruin of a stone dwelling. And she goes into this stone dwelling, finds the hearth and the fire, and she now proceeds to make a fire within the hearth. And it warms her, and she rests easy beside the fire. Now, the other priestesses, some of them awoke, knowing that there was a big, huge storm, and went out to find her. And they discovered her in this old dwelling, and they discovered that she had made this fire from this electrical storm. And they see this as being an incredibly special event also. And they see it as a rite of passage. They saw it as an initiation. They saw it as a message from the innate. And from that day on, there's always been a perpetual flame burning, and there's always been a keeper of the flame. Powerful, powerful, powerful symbol. There's always been a keeper of the flame. And historically, over time, I think there's been 3 occasions where the flame has gone out, but it's always been rekindled. To this day, there is in Kildare a perpetual flame that its seeds go back all that time. Incredible, powerful experience, which is why the month of February has been always kind of associated with rites of passage, with new beginnings, with initiations. And actually the name Brigid, when translated, is bridge. Okay, it means bridge, bridging winter to spring, from the ancient to the new, or the ancient to the modern, from the old to the new. Bridging the worlds. Okay, bridge, very, very powerful. And I was just completely in awe. But it was only a couple of days ago where I realised that there's absolutely clue in the details. Oak leaf brooch, fiery red hair. Okay, and that just, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I hadn't realised, I hadn't joined up the dots. There'd been so many dots I have been joining up, and I'm like, okay. So I sat there. I'd gone to get a cup of tea. I had the webinar on, turned the volume up, made a cup of tea, come back, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking up at the wall. I'm looking up at the portraits, and then I gaze towards the wall hanging, and I thought, my gosh, you're everywhere. You're here. And then I looked at the portrait, and what come back was this immense feeling of, I've come to you in 1,000 ways. I have spoke to you in 1,000 ways, and 1,000 ways more. And I knew that the thread had been woven, and I also knew when I look back, there was so many. There were so many conversations, so many. She was absolutely right. I come to you in a thousand ways. There was a dream that I had just after the first portrait was done, and I'm walking along a roadway and a trackway, and I knew I was in Ireland. I don't know how I knew, but I knew I was in Ireland. I was walking along this trackway, and the further I got along the trackway, the further back in time I felt I was going, because people's clothing changed. So I went from the modern towards the old. Think about, again, the detail. Brigid, bridging the old to the new. Um, and I'm going back, and some of those people would like acknowledge me, there would be a smile, and others just walk past me. And we got far back. It was this feeling going far back, and I stepped off the trackway, and I walked into a copse of trees. Walked into a copse of trees, and there was this lady standing there. It was night time, and she was standing there with a green cloak on, and she had her hood up, and there was this sense of real kind of pale skin, and she was looking up. She was looking up at the moon, and she was speaking a language that I did not physically understand, but I felt it. And she was holding what felt to be a blackthorn staff. And that's for, again, another story for another time, but she was holding a blackthorn staff. And I looked at her, and I could feel in the dream, and I could feel it for the days after, especially as I woke up, that I had met my ancestor. This was one of my ancestors, but this was one of my mum's people, and I knew it, and I felt it so strongly that when I woke up and I felt that, there was tears streaming down my face that I had met one of my mum's people. Now the interesting thing is, my mum's people come from Ireland. My dad was telling me that my granddad, Paddy Burns he was known as, Paddy, he was born just round the corner from St James's Gate in Dublin. Now St James's Gate, and this makes me smile every time I share this story, St James's Gate is the Guinness factory there in Dublin, and my granddad, bless his heart, was born just round the corner from St James's Gate, the Guinness factory. It always makes me smile. So my mum's people come from Ireland. And when I think about it, my mum and her people, her family, her kin, her ancestors would have known about definitely Saint Brigid. They would have known about Saint Brigid and maybe Bridget. And this is an incredible story, isn't it? And you've got to think that those of you know the story of what happened to me when I was 7 years old, when I woke up there at the end of the bed, and there was a lady standing there as clear as I can see myself in the camera right now, will know that was, and it turned out to be, my grandmother on my mum's side, who I have no recollection of, who died when I was only 2 years old. But she come, and then predominantly thereafter was my teacher, who taught me to do what I do today. That seed had been planted all that time ago, at the age of 7. And she passed when I was 2. So, my mum's people have had a huge impact on the work that I do today. So this other strand that has come about, the beginnings of it, if we go back to the Morrigan, is around about 20 years. But with this experience of this incredible being, is the last 10 years, the last decade, and it's only joined up now, which is why I say those threads run through time, but joined up in the most profoundest of ways, with so much detail. You know, it's never by chance, it's by design, and I'm very aware, and it's the next story is going to touch on what it means, what I do with all of this, what happens with all this, what happens next. But it's a thread that has woven everything together, and you know, and I kind of knew, you know, I absolutely knew without a shadow of a doubt. I felt very emotional. I felt like as if, you know, she had been watching over me that night as I slept. She does feel as if she's the nurturer and the nourisher. You know, she has associations to the hearth, to the fire, to home. And I think, you know, we've lived so far out in the world, there is this sense of being called back, to home, to find the heart again within home. You know, she holds that flame and that hearth for family, for kin, for community, and I just knew, and I found this wood turner that turns these little beautiful wooden carvings, and I found that he had made one of Brigid, and I reached out, and it's come from such a far way. It's come from many miles away, but it arrived today. And it arrived today through the letterbox, and today being new moon, and which is why I'm doing this video, you know, because this is going to be a seed of what is to come with some of the direction that I know that we are moving into, and this is way beyond me. This is bigger and greater than me, but it just shows us that, you know, that those threads run through our lives in the most beautiful and profoundest ways. And this feels very special. This is Brigid. You see the flame, and she now, being new moon, rests on my altar. You know, it's never by chance, always by design. And what I feel is really beautiful is that whole kind of thought of you know, that sense of finding the roots within family and within my heritage and history, and within my mum's people. And as I say, the next video in the coming weeks is going to share where this moves, you know, the branch that reaches out from here, what does that mean, and where that takes us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your company. As always, it is an absolute heartfelt pleasure and honour, and I will be seeing you all very soon. Until then, keep shining.